Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to my first online town hall. This is, like I said, the first one of these we've ever done. It should be interesting. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. We already have a lot of questions in that people have written to us on Twitter and Facebook, and we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. But know that you can submit your questions right now, and when we get them in, we'll get them to us. And like I said, we'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Welcome, everybody. I'm John Tester. I want to tell you a little bit about myself before we get into answering the questions. This Montennial, which are millennials from Montana, this Montennial tour that we started several months ago is going to be very, very important. And I say that because getting your input, getting the input from folks on the ground in Montana, particularly the Montennials, is going to be critically important. I get my good ideas from folks on the ground in Montana. I don't get the good ideas back here. I get them from Montanans that talk about problems and solutions to those problems. And this is about hearing about those problems and working through those problems to find solutions so we can hopefully get that put in the form of legislation and get it across the finish line to make Montana and, quite frankly, this country a better place. I was born in a very small town called Big Sandy, population 1,000 back 60 years ago, and started school with about 35 classmates, and basically those classmates that I started school with in first grade, for the most part, I graduated with those same kids 12 years later. And it's important because that's small town Montana, that's small town America, and it's kind of cool that I had the opportunity to make friendships, lifelong friendships, with my classmates over those informative years in grade school and high school. And then went off to college, got a degree in music, envisioned myself as being a high school band director. As things turned out, I ended up teaching elementary music for a couple of years and learned that kindergartners and first graders were some of the best students in the world, and really enjoyed my 2 years teaching in Big Sandy, in the same school that actually I went to elementary school in too. And along the way, met my wife, whose family farmed about 25 miles away from where my grandparents homesteaded, and my folks farmed, and we farm today. Charlotte and I have a couple children. Biologically, we have a girl and a boy. Our daughter is a psychiatric nurse, and her husband work in Helena. Our son lives out here and works out here. And then we took in a girl the same age as my daughter that her and her husband teach in the Helena school system. And quite frankly, we're very proud of all those kids. They have blessed us with 5 grandkids, and we certainly enjoy being around them. I really started out my public service career in my hometown, serving on the Soil Conservation Board and the school board. I even served on the International Organic Certification Board because some 30 years ago or so we converted to organics. But really cut my teeth in those areas, and in the late 90s ran for the state legislature and got elected, had a successful career, and got elected to this job in 2006 and reelected in 2012. It's a very fascinating job. I serve on 5 committees, and basically have served on those 5 committees since I got here. They do what their title says. Veterans Affairs Committee, Indian Affairs Committee, Banking, Homeland Security, and Appropriations. We are in the middle of a lame duck session right now, that time between the election and when the new administration is sworn in and new Congress convenes. And we're basically taking up, the main issue we're taking up is keeping the government going, passing the appropriations bills. And hopefully we will do that, but who knows, it might be a continuing resolution which just extends the previous appropriation bills. But once again, I want to thank everybody for being on this call as we enter in to this new Congress. The input of Montennials is going to be very, very, very important. We have a lot of challenges ahead of us. we're going to have a very, very busy months of January, February, and March with potential confirmations and potential legislation that's going to be put forth. I will tell you at the get-go, I look forward to working with the new administration in areas that we can agree upon. And in areas we can't agree upon, we will hold the administration accountable because that's my job. People need to understand Montana is a rural state. They need to understand the challenges we have as a rural state and quite frankly address those. And it's an educational process, and I think whether the President of the United States is from Chicago, as the present one is, or the President-elect from New York City, I think the educational process about the challenges of a rural state like Montana are very, very important and part of my job. So with that, I think we'll start with the first question, but I want to touch on an issue that I continually hear about from millennials, and I touch on the college campuses a lot, and almost without exception, I hear about college affordability and what can we do to make college more affordable for the next generation of leaders. It is not an easy subject. I can tell you back, I've got two older brothers. Back when they were in college, college was seen as more of a social benefit. So taxpayers picked up more of the fees and tuition costs. As time has moved forward and through the 80s and 90s, it became more of a personal benefit. So tuition rose and rose quite significantly to the point now where it is a huge, huge problem. So there are many different areas. I mean, you've got tuition, you've got the cost of food, board, books, fees, all those kind of things. The state of Montana has to do their part and put in money through the Board of Regents to be able to support our institutions of higher learning. And quite frankly, at the federal level, I am really focused on Pell Grants, and I have a bill to make Pell full-time. I think it's critically important that, especially in the society we live in today, sometimes non-traditional students especially can't just go to school in the fall and the spring. Summer is a very important time for learning too. So a full-time Pell is something that we need to put into effect, and quite frankly, we need to increase the amount of these Pell Grants because as college costs increase, as it does with inflation, Pell needs to keep up with that. So the number of Pels being available year-round, and the amount of Pell is very, very important. And I think that can help with also the state doing what they can do to reduce costs. We are also working, I am working, on making sure that colleges have research dollars that can also help offset, not only do good research, but also help offset costs that are fixed costs that keep our colleges running. So we're doing our best. I can tell you one of the big problems we have right now, and I'm talking to folks who know this firsthand, is when you come out of college with a big debt, it really reduces your options. It reduces your options to where you want to work or the kind of job you want to have. Some of you might want to work for a nonprofit but simply can't afford to. Some of you might want to stay in Montana and simply can't afford to. We want to increase the options for you, and college affordability is a big part of increasing your options. And you need to stay involved on this issue. You need to make sure that your elected officials are held accountable when it comes to the cost of higher education. So we'll start with the first question here. And like I said, we had a lot of these submitted today through Facebook and Twitter. And if you want to submit a question now, is as good a time to do it as any. And hopefully we'll be able to get to it during this time that we have for this online town hall. This one comes from Garrett. It says, what can be done to boost wages for millennials? I'm gonna go back a few decades. My grandmother was a huge advocate for education, and her kids, my mother and her sisters, graduated from high school in the 30s, and she insisted they go off to college, and they did, and they all ended up with degrees. They actually all ended up being teachers too. But that is what really set the ball rolling for their life. And I think the same thing can be true today, 85, 90 years later, that education is the key to be able to boost your economic opportunities. Once again, it has to be affordable, make no mistake about that. But being able to apply yourself when you're in high school, and then using those skills you learned there to get the most you can out of college is really, really important to develop a skill set that works in this 21st century economy. And so I firmly believe education is the key to be able to boost wages for this new economy. And make sure you go into fields where jobs are available. And there's plenty of examples, especially if you want to stay in Montana, where you might be getting a degree where there simply are no jobs in Montana for that skill set. So make sure when you're making decisions that if you want to stay in the state of Montana, which I hope you do, that you're developing a skill set that is in demand in the state of Montana, and there are plenty of them. So thanks for the question, Garrett. Next we have Annie, who says, what will you do to preserve the right to clean water? Big question. We're a headwater state. Water is our most valuable resource. Make no mistake about that. I'm a farmer. I can tell you, you don't raise crops without good water. So this is an issue that touches everybody, whether you live in areas that are more populated or less populated, it doesn't matter. Clean water is critically important. And I will tell you that I think this is an area where we need to support the regulating agencies that ensure that our water remains clean. And I think it's really important. We also need to support with programs these local water systems that provide clean drinking water to municipalities, and we do that through revolving loan funds and others. So it is really important that we hold folks accountable to make sure that our water remains clean. It is critically important. And by the way, since we are a headwater state, if it gets screwed up in our state, it's screwed up all the way down the river channel. So we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So thanks for the question, Annie. Elise has a question that says, what can be done to combat hate, racism, and bigotry, of which we've seen a lot over the last year? You know, we really kind of thought this country was further along than I guess what it is, and that's unfortunate. I think, once again, take a look at what got us to where we are today and improve upon that. And one of the things that got us to where we are today is our public education system, where people of all different colors and all different economic backgrounds were put together in the same classroom and learned how to work with one another. And I think it's a really important point moving forward. There are a lot of folks who want to dismantle our public education system. It is the basis for democracy. And quite frankly, I think it's the basis for kindness towards people. The school I came from was not that diverse, but we had our diversity in different ways. And in the end, by the time we graduated from high school, we had one another's backs. We looked out for one another. And I think that's what public education does. When you get different folks together in the same classroom, they learn how to work together. And so the key is empowering public education, making it all it can be, which also helps you when you go off for the economy too. So it helps deal with hate, racism, and bigotry, and also deals you with the skill set to move forward. So Elise, thanks for the question. It's very, very, very timely, quite frankly. We've got a question here from, oh, by the way, I just got a note that we have 200 folks online, actually more than 200, so welcome. Elizabeth has a question and says, what are your thoughts on the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is a hot issue right now. Got a lot of folks in North Dakota, and quite frankly, it's an issue that I think we need to take a step back from and make sure that we respect one another's property rights. This is on some historic ground. From a Native American standpoint, we need to respect that. And we need to find the common ground so that we can move forward. Violence is not an option here. I don't think it should be tolerated. In the meantime, I think developing good communication between the principal parties is very, very important. I can tell you that I know that there are Native Americans, spiritual Native Americans that are there for all the right reasons, trying to find solutions and trying to move the ball forward on the issues surrounding the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I encourage us to follow their example, because quite frankly, that's how we will find a solution to a very controversial issue that has been very hot. We've all seen the stories in the national news. It is, we step back, we respect one another's opinions, and we find the common ground to move forward. And if we do that, I think we can be successful. Important question. Amber asks about the VA, and the question is, what is your plan to reduce wait times at the Veterans Administration? And been a big issue for some time. We've made some advances, but quite frankly, not enough in the wait times. They have a new scheduling program that they're in process of putting in, which I think is going to be helpful. I think the fact that we are working to get more doctors on the ground and more nurses on the ground within the VA is going to be helpful in reducing those wait times. All this stuff takes some time to get implemented, but I think we're working on it, not fast enough, but we're working on it. I am working with a guy by the name of Johnny Isaacson as the two leaders on the Veterans Affairs Committee. Johnny's from Georgia, I'm from Montana. Southern state from the northern tier. We both work very well together, and look forward to working with Johnny on the Veterans Affairs Committee to hold the VA accountable on issues like wait times and others. We're in the middle of a transition with all the agencies, and Veterans Affairs is no exception. We don't know who the new secretary is going to be. I can tell you that I am a big fan of Bob McDonald, the current Secretary of the VA. I think he's done a good job building leadership and trying to get more docs and nurses on the ground. Hopefully the next VA Secretary will take what he has done and continue to improve upon that. And it's going to be our job as the Oversight Committee on Veterans Affairs to make sure that they do that. And I think that can help with the wait times. And then one other thing that I think can help in a big way is making sure that the Choice Act works as advertised. The Choice Act for the veterans that are on this online town hall, of which there are over 300 people on now, I'm told. The veterans out there know the Choice Act has not been working very well, and it was put into effect for rural states like Montana. Everybody can take advantage of it, but it really can apply more to Montana than anywhere else. Where veterans who can't get the health care at a VA facility or are too far away from the VA facility can get health care at their local hospital. There's been some problems with that bill. We have a fix with the choice called the Veterans First Act that has been passed out of the Veterans Affairs Committee for 8 or 9 months now, and we haven't been able to get it to the floor, and we're not going to be able to get it to the floor during this lame duck, it appears, to get passed. But that will give the VA the flexibility that I think will be a step in the right direction to make sure that choice works for our veterans. Wait times are a big issue, and we're going to continue to work to try to reduce them as much as possible. Amber, thanks for your interest in our veterans, and thanks for the question. Next, we have a question from Kelly. It says, what can be done about pharmaceutical companies controlling the marketplace? Basically getting to the issue of pharmaceutical drugs costing so much and seeing their costs go up over the last few years. I always talk about the story, and hopefully he's on, of my best friend from my K-12 years who got diagnosed with diabetes at a young age, and talks about a vial of insulin back in the early 70s, 70, 71, costing a few bucks, and today costing north of $150. It's the same insulin. That is not acceptable, and actually is somewhat criminal. I think the best thing we can do for pharmaceutical companies is put more transparency on the issue. Find out how they're pricing stuff, make that information available to folks like me and their customers that are buying the pharmaceuticals. Find out how much money they're spending on ads to try to entice people in using different drugs. I think the more transparency that's put on pharmaceutical companies, the better off we are to know why they're charging the prices they're charging for the prescription drugs that are so necessary for quality of life for people out there. And where it's merited that those costs be charged, so be it. But where it's not, then we can hold them accountable if there's transparency in that marketplace. And by the way, we're working on that. I think it's one of the fixes to the healthcare system that we need to do is put more transparency on pharmaceutical companies so that they're held accountable for the prices they charge. Thanks. There's probably going to be a number of healthcare questions. I have a notion that will probably be taken up, whether it's Obamacare or Medicare, but we shall see as we go forth here. Speaking of that, Cindy says, how do you plan to fix Obamacare without dropping coverage for millions of Americans? And huge issue. You've seen the stories that are out here about the total repeal of Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, which would repeal health care for people with pre-existing conditions, lifetime caps, take kids off of policies that could be on parents up to age 26. All those are positive things. I can tell you that the uninsured in Montana has dropped to single digits with the movement of Obamacare and the implementation of it. I was asked today, as a matter of fact, in the hallway, what was going to happen with the health care bill. And what I told them is that it would be criminal to kick people off of health insurance that have never had health insurance before, those folks with pre-existing conditions, the folks that might be unlucky enough to end up with cancer and hit a cap and then be thrown off the way it was in the old days. And they said, well, how's that going to be fixed? Well, I can tell you there's been plenty of fixes, not plenty, there's been a few fixes to the Affordable Health Care Act since it was passed 7 years ago, 8 years ago. The problem has been is that we really haven't focused on it. And now folks around here are talking about repealing, and they've been talking about it for a long time, but there has been no plan for replacement, and that's a problem. And if we go back to the old system, we end up with double-digit folks uninsured, those costs being shifted, and you get a whole bunch of people who are sick through no fault of their own that end up getting kicked off of health insurance. I can just tell you that what I plan on doing on this issue is making sure that folks can afford to get sick, which was the whole issue before we passed the health care bill. Does it have problems? It absolutely has some problems, and we need to work together, hopefully in a bipartisan way, to fix those problems. But until there's an understanding that we can't go back to the old system, we're still going to be having this debate. And so I really think that things should work out, because I've heard a lot of folks who are very, very opposed to healthcare come back in and say, wait a second, and let me give you an example of it. On Monday, I flew out of Salt Lake. I had a gentleman walk up to me, said he was from Big Fork, said he was very conservative. He had good conservative creds. It was good. He walked away, thanked me for my service. He was very appreciative. And probably not a voter of mine, by the way, but very appreciative of my service. And when he was gone for about 2 or 3 minutes, I was standing there waiting for the plane to be able to be loaded. He came back and he said, same guy, said, I just want you to know my girlfriend has some real health care issues, and the Obamacare has allowed her to get the health care she needs to have a quality of life. And so think about that when you're making changes to the health care bill. And I will be, and hopefully 99 other senators and 435 other House members will be thinking about that too. Thanks for the question. We've got a question from today that just came in from Sean. It says, what can we do to address climate change? I will tell you that for those folks out there that don't think it's real, the first week in November I was driving across the High Line, 72 degrees first week in November. Had to have the air conditioner on in the car, it was so warm. This kind of stuff is changing every year. Something's a little different on my farm, and I'm sure you're seeing things that are different from 5 years ago. And so we need to deal with it in a common sense way. And I think there are plenty of things we can do. And all of the above energy strategy, I think, is critical. Renewables are something, 20 years ago I was told that Montana could be the Saudi Arabia of renewable energy, and I believe that. We have access to incredible wind and solar resource, to geothermal resources. And if you combine that with adding some dollars in for research and development on other energy resources that folks that are your age and younger may have in their head to be able to develop, I think our energy future is very, very bright moving forward. And I also think that the climate change issue, which is going to be around for a while, will help to deal with it in a common sense way and not slow our economy down one bit in the process. In fact, push our economy forward and create more jobs and create more access to energy that will allow us to continue to exist on this earth. There's all sorts of stuff that goes on. A few years back, every state in the union except I believe 2 had a natural disaster. FEMA was called in. I believe it was 2 states there was only 2 states that didn't have a natural disaster, whether that's flood or whether those are hurricanes or whatever it was, drought, fires. The fact is that the climate is becoming more and more extreme each day, and Montana is known for having an unpredictable climate, but this is really getting pretty crazy worldwide, and we see it almost every day. So thanks for the question. Next we got a double dip on this one. Orland and Bob said, what can be done to protect Medicare and Social Security? Great question. And once again, I pick up a paper today and I hear about somebody who wants to privatize Medicare or privatize Social Security. These are promises that are made to people that we ought not be screwing around with. Folks that are dependent on it. And I get asked also by a lot of millennials, well, that stuff's not going to be around when I get old enough to use it, and I couldn't disagree more. I think it will be. I think we have to be around for a long time in the past, and it will be in the future also. But for these folks who want to privatize it and do away with it, I'm going to fight them tooth and nail, I'll just tell you that. These are programs that have worked very, very well. They're programs that my parents took advantage of. They're programs that my older brother are taking advantage of, and they're programs that I intend to take advantage of, and I intend to make sure that you're able to take advantage of them when you get to be of retirement age. So, and also know this, these are safety net programs. These weren't ever set up to be retirement funds. They were set up to be safety net programs, and that's what they are, and that's what we should be working on to make sure that they're around for generations to come, and we can if we work together. But those folks who want to destroy them, that's a sad state of affairs in my book. Thanks for the question, Orland and Bob. Next we have Grace that's got 2 questions. She says, how can we lower the cost of childcare? And then, do you support early childhood education? I will answer the second one first because it's easy. Yes, I support early childhood education. I think it's a no-brainer. I think the quicker we can get kids in and get them going, the better they're going to do in elementary school and high school and in college. And I just think it's the right thing to do in this 21st century. How can we lower the cost of child care? Well, I think there's block grants out there that we can utilize. I toured a couple months ago. I toured a child care center at the University of Montana, where the university helped supplement a child care program for students, for parents and students who are going to school for their children. I think if we're able to support at this level or give tax credits to businesses that provide child care for their employees, I think those are all win-wins, and you get a lot of bang for the buck for that. I look at my kids now who have kids that are elementary school, middle school, and before they got into school, they were paying thousands and thousands of dollars for child care every day. It can be a real problem for folks. So I just think we need to look at block grants and tax credits for businesses to help them do the right thing. And I think there's a ton of businesses out there that want to do the right thing. It's an affordability issue, and I think tax credits can help go to help solve that problem. Next, Justin, one of my people here, it says, will you support bills that help farmers slumps in prices? Absolutely. I think if there's one thing the Farm Bill needs to do, and there's many that it needs to do, it is provide that safety net in times of drought and low prices. Agriculture is a very cyclical business, and we know it. Those of us that have been in it for generations know it. We've seen what our parents have gone through, and we see what our kids are going through, and we know what we've gone through. And I think that the Farm Bill needs to be done fairly and equitably, but there needs to be that safety net component. Not so farmers can make a bunch of money on bad years, but so it gives them that safety net so they can meet the bankers that they owe a few bucks to, which most farmers do, and meet those needs and yet stay in business to be able to provide the food security that this country deserves. I have said there are two things in this country that I believe sets this country apart from all others, and one is our public education system, and the other is family farm agriculture. I've talked about public education and what a big believer I am in that, and how we need to make sure that our public education continues to grow and get better and serve the people of this country. And it's the same thing with family farm agriculture. And it distresses me to see small towns across the country, but Montana is no exception, get smaller and smaller as farms get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think that if we can help with a good, smart farm bill, in which I'm doing listening sessions around the state on this issue to get input from farmers to see what they want in it, but also increase more competition in the marketplace, because I don't think there's a farmer out there that wouldn't rather get their check from the marketplace than from the government. I think both of those together can make a big difference for folks in production agriculture. We've got, let's go over here. We've got Tricia, I hope I pronounced that right. What will you do to ensure that Planned Parenthood receives funding? Well, I will tell you that Title X funding is critically important, and access for people to have health care, women included, is very, very important. And if you take away options, you're really diminishing quality of life in a big, big way. Planned Parenthood does a great job supplying health care to people who need it. We will continue to support Title X appropriations and make sure that they're able to do the screenings and the work that they do to make sure that women get the health care that they need. And it's as simple as that. In rural communities across Montana, sometimes health care is hard to come by. And we should not be taking health care options off the table. We should be looking to increase health care options because in rural states like Montana, we need options to be able to meet the needs, and women need options to be able to meet their health care needs. We have received a lot of questions on the Dakota pipeline. I addressed the questions earlier, and I think it was fairly comprehensive. If you have put in a question on that and you haven't heard me give that answer, you can scroll back and watch it. And so I encourage you to do that. From Mary, what are your ideas for investing in clean energy? We have a bill to streamline, cut the red tape for renewable energy development on federal lands. I think that's an important component. I think that there are some tax credits for renewable energy, and I don't believe these should go on forever, but I do believe they should go on until the industry gets off the ground and becomes competitive. I think we've seen a lot of advancements in wind and solar and the cost, and I think we're going to continue to see a lot of advancements in wind and solar and the cost. And I think that's good for our economy. It's good for jobs. It's good for energy security. And so we're going to continue to cut red tape and for energy projects and continue to support, at least in the short term, tax credits for renewables. Then we've got Landon. It says, what are you doing to support Eastern Montana? And most people I think eastern Montana is the eastern 2/3 of the state, and I live in that portion of the state. We have done a lot and will continue to do a lot. Pushing for broadband is really important, and infrastructure overall is very, very, very important. I think without infrastructure, we're kind of dead in the water in eastern Montana. I mean, I think there's a lot of business that can be done if we have a broadband infrastructure, good highways, good roads, good rails. We also recently had a rural healthcare summit. Heard from a lot of the hospitals in rural Montana, in eastern Montana, about the challenges that they have for providing healthcare. And I can tell you that I know from my small town, from my hometown, you take away the hospital, you've lost a big part of your community. So making sure those hospitals are able to stay in business and provide the health care, back to the Planned Parenthood question, only this time it's rural medical centers, making sure they have the health care that they can offer is really critically important. We continue to push for that. We're also doing, like I said, a series of Farm Bill listening sessions around the eastern 2/3 of Montana, and we're doing some in the western third on timber too. But the eastern 2/3 of Montana, talking about what needs to be in the next Farm Bill, what can be cut from the Farm Bill to save money, and what needs to be added to it to make it make that safety net more secure, or the rural development components more available to the folks on the ground. So we continue to work to make eastern Montana all it can be. It does distress me that we're seeing a population decrease in many of the small towns in eastern Montana, and we just got to look for options. And I think we've got to look for ways that we can expand their ability to be successful. And I don't think it's going to happen from a top-down approach. I think it's going to happen from a ground-up approach, because a lot of these small communities have some great ideas, and that's why we do sessions just like this, to get those ideas, to be able to take them back here and make a difference. We've got another one that we just got online. Mary says, how can we reduce the debt? Big issue, $19 trillion. I can tell you that it's a big issue. The first thing we need to do is this. The first thing, if we want to really get the debt under control, and I'm going to tell you where we need to start. We need to start with doing campaign finance reform. If we are able to do campaign finance reform, that will free people up from looking over their left and their right shoulder on every decision that's made in Washington, D.C., afraid that they might make the wrong decision and get attacked from the left or the right or both. I believe we need to get a balanced budget amendment passed. I think we need to do it thoughtfully, and it needs to be phased in. But I think that's important. Montana has one. It's worked out pretty well. I think we need to be smart, look for duplication in programs, cut those programs. And that's where the campaign finance reform comes in, because every one of those programs has a constituents behind it. Some of those constituencies have a lot of dough. We don't know how that money's being spent on these campaigns. And quite frankly, that would be a good thing to do, so we could reduce the duplication in programs. The other thing we need to do is we need to look at the tax code. Max Baca started to do this before he left, and I applauded his efforts. And that is, take a look at the tax code and see what's in that tax code for tax loopholes, we'll call them, that don't create jobs. And if we've got tax incentives out there that don't create jobs, we need to do away with them. It is as simple as that. And I think if we were able to do those 3 or 4 things, I think we could get the spending under control. But let me say this, because I've talked about a lot of things that do cost money on here, from child care to making sure that higher education is more affordable. We need to prioritize our spending. And we can't continue to fight every war that comes down the pipe. So we need to be smart, and we need to be focused, and we need to really do it from the eye of what is going to create jobs and what's going to move this 21st century economy we live in forward. But it can be done, and I think it will be done. But I think we need to start with campaign finance reform. That's my opinion. Next we have Anders and Susan. What can be done to support access to affordable housing? I got a notion, I just got a sneaking suspicion that this question may have come from Bozeman, Montana. I will tell you that there's some low-income housing credits that can help with affordable housing. There is FHA and USDA backed loans that can help with affordable housing. But quite frankly, what can even help more with affordable housing is the fact that we are sending students out of college with a debt that doesn't allow them to have the additional income to be able to buy that house. And so I really think that affordable college is really a starting point to be able to get to affordable housing, because I'm encouraging you to go to college to get the degree you need to be able to live and have the quality of life and live the American dream. And if that's not attainable because it costs too much, it stops you from being able to buy in a house. It reduces your options on where you want to live and where you want to work. And so once again, these are somewhat complex issues, but not that complex. And I think we need to start with college affordability and then move forward from there. Next, we've got John. What can be done to support vocational education programs? And that's a great question, John. You know, just from the top, I would just say Perkins loans are very, very critical to that. But I also think we need to look for every opportunity to be able to expand vocational programs, especially in a state like Montana, where there's plenty of opportunities out there to work with your hands. And I'm not talking about working on a computer with your hands, because obviously some of us have deficiencies there. But backhoes, electricians, plumbers, you know, laying flooring. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I think that whether it's Perkins loans or other opportunities that come down the pipe through the appropriations process to really focus those dollars to be able to help with vocational programs, critically important. And you know, I would just say this, I came out of college with a 4-year degree, but I'm not sure that's the best these days. I think you have to look at your options and look at the opportunities out there. And 4-year degrees are important, but maybe you'll do better with a 2-year degree. Maybe you'll do better going to school that teaches you know, hygienics, the people who work on your mouth with the dentist, all those kind of things. I haven't got the word for it, but you know what I mean. There's lots of opportunities out there. I just talked to, had a hearing today on Homeland Security with Customs and Border Patrol, and they're looking for people. This doesn't have to do with vocational education, but it does have to do with job opportunities. These are pretty good paying jobs, have pretty good benefits. They're hard jobs, they're difficult jobs, there's no mistake about that, but most jobs are hard. And so I would tell folks, especially those folks from along the northern border, get a hold of Border Patrol and Customs. That's a solid job. It's going to be around a while. I'll tell you, Homeland Security is going to be a big issue for a long time to come. And so maybe that's your cup of tea. Maybe that's the direction you want to go. But we need to also not only have the programs, but we also let people know where the demand is. And so hopefully I'm helping out the folks at Customs and Border Protection a little bit. Next we have Carissa. Carissa says, how do you feel about Trump as president? Great question. Well, I will tell you what, I think that, and it's been said before by other people, but I think we need to give him an opportunity to govern. There are a lot of press reports that talk about good things and bad things. And I just think that it's important we give him the opportunity to govern. I think it's important we work with him, that I work with him where I can, whether that's draining the swamp or whether that's with infrastructure or campaign finance reform potentially, because he's talked about that too. And you know, and hold him accountable in other areas. I mean, if he wants to take away health care from folks that have pre-existing conditions, and I don't know that he does, but if he does, we'll have to hold him accountable on that and move forward. So I'm willing to give him a chance to govern. I think that if he's successful, it makes my life easier, quite frankly. And if he's not successful, then we have to hold him accountable. What else we got here? I'm about done with this pile, folks. This is the last one on this. It says, Sean says, what are your thoughts on charter schools, vouchers, and privatization? I think our time would be better spent on making public education the best it can be. I come from a small community. Charter schools and vouchers and privatization aren't really, that isn't going to get us where we want to do unless we want to start boarding our kids 80 miles away from where I live. I think we have a great system of education in this country. Can it be improved upon? It absolutely can be. But it's a foundation for a democracy. And I think if we start weeding kids out based on economic opportunity, we're making a big mistake. And I think that the vouchers and the privatization and the charter schools, I served on the school board for 9 years. I can tell you that folks made their opinions known to the school board all the time. And I think it's really important that we do that, whether you're in a AA school like Billings or Great Falls or Missoula, or whether you're in a Class C school like Chester or Big Sandy or Saco. People need to make sure their opinions are heard so that we can continue to improve the schools we have. And I think it's important we make the investment, we encourage the best of the best to be in the classroom, and we hold them accountable. And I think that's a much better option than privatization or vouchers or charter schools. Let me see. We've got land here that says, do you think public lands should stay in public hands? Absolutely, unequivocally. We have a $6 billion a year outdoor industry in the state of Montana, 64,000 jobs. Arguably the biggest business driver in the state of Montana. But the fact is that many of us who live here and many of us who want to continue living in Montana do it because we can go hunting and fishing and hiking and biking and those kind of fun things in the great outdoors that Montana has to offer. And our federal lands and our state lands are a critical component of that. There are some that want to turn the federal lands over to the state. I think that would be a huge mistake. I think we need to keep those federal lands for the public to be able to use and be the economic driver that it is in the state of Montana. So I appreciate the question, and I will tell you that I think we are just scratching the surface when it comes to economic opportunity and recreational opportunity on our public lands. So I firmly believe they need to stay in public hands. The other thing I would say is this. Those public lands that are out there for the ranchers that are on this video conference know that it's a pretty good deal. And if it's sold, or even if it's turned over to the state, those grazing rates are going to go up significantly, and I don't think that helps the folks that are in production agriculture from a livestock perspective. So, number of reasons, but probably most important from a recreational standpoint, it's really what makes the greatest state in the Union, Montana, continue to be the greatest state. What do we got here? We got a few more questions off of here. We got Bob, do you think government is the answer to all problems? No, I don't. I absolutely don't. I think that the answer to our problems comes from the ground in Montana, and some of the problems can be solved by private sector, some can be solved by government, and some can be solved by a partnership between the government and the private sector. But no, not in the least. I think that there are plenty of examples of government regulation that needs to be pared back, and I think there's plenty of examples where the private sector may be taking advantage of clean water or clean air and need to be reined in. So I think everything has its role in this economy that we have. Yeah, we've got another question on the pipeline. As I said earlier, I think if you go back, you can hear my response to that, which should answer your question. And basically, what it was is that people need to take a step back and respect one another, have a conversation. Violence should not be a part of this equation. If it is, it'll never get solved. This is from Kelly. It says, what do you think of the nominee for Secretary of Education? I'm going to hopefully meet with her when we get back in January to find out what kind of a person she is, see if she's fit for the job, see if she knows rural education issues and education issues in general. As I pointed out earlier, served as a teacher, elementary music teacher, and also served on the school board in my hometown for a number of years. Education is one of those things I'm very passionate about. I have been concerned about some of the things that I've read about her on vouchers. We'll have a good conversation. It'll be a respectful conversation, and we'll see where she really is. It's one of the advantages I have in confirmation of secretaries. Look, this lady's got a lot of money. I'm sure she's very successful, and I'm sure she's very, very pleasant. And she may do a great job as Secretary of Education, but we'll make that assessment when I have her in my office and visit with her about where she stands on various issues, whether it's vouchers or privatization or how we continue to build our public education system so we're competitive in the 21st century. I gotta grab a drink of water here. All right, we have got, this guy's got a great name, Stein. He is concerned about the Veterans Choice Program, and you should be, so am I. The rollout was rocky. It's been somewhat of a wreck, quite frankly, to be blunt. And we have a Veterans First bill. I talked about it a little bit earlier that passed out of the Veterans Affairs Committee unanimously that we're waiting for action on the Senate floor, which I think will help the Veterans Choice Act pass. I just want to say one thing, because I know we've probably got a number of veterans on this town hall. These folks served. They served admirably. They sacrificed. I just signed a bunch of cards that we're sending off to service members around the world, thanking them for this service this holiday season. And I just want to thank you guys and gals who served. Thank your families for their sacrifices, and we're going to do our best to make sure we live up to the promises to the veterans in this country. This would be a whole different country without you. So thank you very much. And the Veterans Choice Program is one of those programs that we need to get fixed. And if we could ever get the Veterans First Act passed, I think we'd be taking a step in the right direction to fixing Veterans Choice. And what it would do basically is put more docs on the ground, put more nurses on the ground, cut down the silos so the VA could actually intervene when things aren't working with the third-party provider, and provide accountability so that we can make sure the VA is doing the job. Well, I just want to say you have an opportunity. We're going to wrap this up now, but we've got over 350 folks online, 500 plus comments. If I didn't get to your question, you go to tester.senate.gov. Email me your comment, we'll get back to you with the answer. That's the only way we can do it. Wished I had the time, but there's some great questions, and hopefully you got your question, even if you didn't, even if it wasn't the one you asked, somebody else may have asked it the same way. So go to tester.senate.gov, type in your questions, and I'll get back to you with an answer. I want to thank you very much. If there's anything on here, you know, like scroll back and watch the video. Appreciate that for all the Montennials. You are our next generation of leaders. I need to get you involved by giving us suggestions on how to fix a government that, quite frankly, hasn't been working very well the last few years. And I think if we're able to work together and communicate well, we can make good things happen. Thank you for being on this town hall, and appreciate the opportunity to visit with everybody, and take care, be well. I think we're out of time. God bless you.